All right. So hi, how you doing? I hope everybody's having a good day or a good night, depending on where you are around the world. And I hope you guys have already subscribed to my YouTube channel. If you haven't already, you guys definitely should. It's called Psych Life. It has the same symbol as my Instagram, which is a live video. Well, today I wanted to focus on a different theory. I'm never going to really go over the same theory twice unless I feel there's significant enough information that I can't do it in 15 minutes. I'll do another one. But that hasn't happened yet, has it? So here is the theory I'm going to focus on today. And it's the stages of grief. I've done the stages of change, which is fairly different from the stages of grief. The stages of change is something, an evolution a person goes through. It's almost like a sequence of steps. But this one is also similar, but it's not the same. One's used for addiction, which was a few videos back. This one's used for grief. Now, let's talk about the basics. This theory was made by, or created by, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler. Both of them, Elizabeth, I don't believe is an American psychologist. David, I believe so, but don't take my word on that. I have to double check that. But what's important is the material at hand. Let's start off with what is grief. Grief is an internal feeling that occurs when someone loses something, whether they lose a relationship, someone's passed away, a job loss. When people think of this theory in specific, a lot of times they'll think about just someone that died and they're grieving. But there's much more to that. What happens when someone loses a relationship, one that they've been with for 10 years? What happens when someone loses a job they've been with for 5 years? We all go through these stages. Now, it's important for me to point out that they've changed this theory a little bit. They have now they have 7, but I'm only going to focus on the basic 5 for the sake of David Kessler and Dr. Ross. So we'll start off with the first one. Okay, denial. Let's pretend someone passed away, right? Someone passed away. A lot of times a person will experience denial, which is, it can't be true. It can't be true. They'll start, someone passed away. I'll use myself as an example. I think that's the best thing I can do. I can only speak for myself. I'll use myself as an example. Let's say I have an uncle that passed away. He was a close uncle to me. He passed away, and that night I go to sleep. The next morning I start thinking, it can't be that he passed away. I don't want to accept it. That's my defense mechanism. I don't want to accept that my uncle passed away. I can't accept it. And these are the stages a lot of us go through. I'm going to interrupt my example for a second and remind everybody here, depending on cultural background, depending on genetics, depending on environment, depending on so many things, we all grieve a different way. It's not so much as an A, B, C, D, E process. It's more of, some people won't even experience denial and go straight to anger. Some people will go straight to depression, and because they skip these stages. It all depends. But a lot of times, these these 5 here are ones that typically people experience. But there is no typical way to grieve. And I think that's important. So I'll start saying in the first one, my uncle died. It can't be my uncle died. I don't want to accept. That's my defense mechanism. It's my defense mechanism. And all those emotions that I'm holding, that I don't want to accept, eventually they're going to come to the surface. So once I'll drop my denial, my emotions, I start getting feelings of the feelings that I'm holding in, the good times, the bad times, whatnot. And I might get angry, right? I might get angry. Now I'm saying, I'm mad. Let's just put there. Very simplistic, but I just want to keep it simple for everybody that doesn't really follow or isn't too knowledgeable on the subject. So now I might experience anger. And what's unique about anger. This is the emotion that typically we're most accustomed to managing. Oftentimes, this emotion, anger, is one that we experience every day, and we each have an ingrained way of, or a series of list of coping skills that we use to do this. So anger, I'll get angry, I'll get mad. And then bargaining is an interesting one because I'll start negotiating, especially if I believe in some sort of divine power. I'll say, God, let's say here, I can say, God, please, I'll do anything. Let's put it like that. God, please, I'll do anything. I'll start negotiating. Oh, if I wake up tomorrow and my uncle is still alive, I promise I'll start recycling. God, if my uncle's alive tomorrow, I promise, if my uncle's alive tomorrow when I wake up, I promise I'm going to be a better husband. I promise I'm going to be a better father. I promise I'm going to spend more time with him. And you start negotiating. Even though you know it might not be real, but you start trying everything. Then comes depression. Once we realize that the bargaining isn't going to work, and remember, this can all happen within a series of one day, or this can happen within months, this stage. And this isn't necessarily to try and explain how people grieve. This is just more to try and portray an understanding of what's going on with the person. It's not supposed to be a solution, but more of a clinician's viewpoint on as to what's going on with the person. We'll go on to the next one, depression. I don't want to leave the house. This stage is also interesting because depression, as we all know, can lead to health problems. Depression can lead to health problems. It can lead, I'm going to throw out some stats at you that I wrote down that you guys might be interested in. When it comes to depression, where was it I wrote it down? Give me a second, guys. When it comes to depression, 40% of people that deal with grief will suffer some form of anxiety disorder within the first year of a death of a loved one. So if my uncle died, I might have a 40% chance, according to statistics, of course, it gets more complicated than that. I have a 40% chance to start feeling some sort of anxiety disorder. And anxiety isn't the same as depression, but they're correlated with one another for sure. And here's another fun stat. There can be up to a 70% increase in death risk of a surviving spouse within the first 6 months of the death of his or her partner. So, obviously that statistic's a little off because a lot of times people will grieve at a later age, and then at that later age, let's say they're 75 and their spouse died, now all of a sudden they have a 70% chance of higher increase of passing away within a 6-month period. That's kind of tough to assimilate a little bit what I said there, but depression can be a hard one, and sometimes they took it out of the DSM-4, but prolonged depression, prolonged grief after a passing of loved one, after a losing of a job, can be a serious matter. But all in all, eventually we're going to have to accept. We're going to have to accept that that person passed away or that we lost a job. And acceptance, what does acceptance do? Once you accept that someone passed away, what does acceptance do? Once you accept, you can start dealing with it. You can start doing certain things. And how can you do that? Journaling. I'm always a big advocate for journaling. Doesn't have to be specific, doesn't have to be there doesn't have to be a specific time frame. You just journal. That can be a great coping mechanism. Journaling, being around loved ones. And it is important when adolescents, when they lose a parent, that they have someone they can lean on. Because just because they're an adolescent doesn't mean that they aren't going to go through the stages of grief. Yes, they might not go exactly like this. Maybe they skip it. Maybe they don't. Maybe a person or an adolescent doesn't feel denying. They don't deny that their parent passed away, but they'll feel angry. And what is the indication there? Trauma? Of course. Trauma-informed counseling has to be involved. Remember, this isn't a causational approach or a causational theoretical theory. This is something that is typical for individuals to experience when they lose someone or they lose something like a job that they've associated themselves with for such a long time. And what's interesting is, and I'm going to use this platform to say it, is that physical pain, let me see if this blue one. Physical pain and social pain equal same part of the brain. I really recommend you guys do your own readings. Social pain, which is, you could throw it in grief under social pain, rejection, and physical pain are experienced in the same part of the brain. Oftentimes we use, when in the passing of a loved one, we may say stuff like, my heart is broken, I don't feel good. And that's because we're using vocabulary that we would describe physical pain to describe our social pain, and that's all in the same part of the brain. Our brain is all interconnected. And I just thought that was a cool fact to share with you guys. End all be all, I hope you guys enjoyed this small presentation. And if you guys have any, not questions, because I get a lot of messages random, but if you guys have anything you guys like me to talk about, just shoot me a message. Hey, why don't you talk about this theory? Oh, hey, why don't you touch about this? And I'll see what I can do. And the last thing I'm going to ask, if you guys haven't, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right? Appreciate it, guys. See ya.